Good evening. All right, let's do an audio check here. Test, test, 1, 2, audio. Audio is good. Let me get a little closer. There we go. All right. Let's get going straight into the articles today. All right, here we go. First article for the read-along today, since we did have a bye week last week, last Sunday for Father's Day. This week we will be reading The People's Red Line. Over 100,000 surround White House to reject U.S.-Israeli genocide in Gaza. Written or published by Morgan Artiukina, June 10th, 2024. 3-minute read. Photo is of protesters from the People's Red Line in the front of the White House. Credit Liberation photo. On June 8th, pro-Palestine activists traveled from across the United States to Washington, D.C. to attend the latest massive demonstration of opposition to the U.S.-Israeli genocide in Gaza. The national action was organized by Palestinian Youth Movement, the People's Forum, National Student for Justice in Palestine, U.S. Palestinian Community Network, AUDA, the Palestine Right to Return Coalition, and Answer Coalition, among others. Wearing red, the over 100,000 attendees completely encircled the White House, holding a 2-mile-long red banner inscribed with the names of the 40,000 Palestinians martyred by Israel in Gaza since October. This formed what organizers called the, quote, People's Red Line, end quote, a powerful symbolic rejection of President Joe Biden's lie that an Israeli attack on Rafah would be his, quote, red line, end quote, for supplying the regime with further weapons. Rafah is the southernmost city of the Gaza Strip, and it is where over 1 million Palestinian refugees are sheltering in massive tent cities after Israel bombed their homes in the north and drove them out. Weeks of Israeli bombing of Rafah using U.S.-made bombs and aircrafts have caused horrific massacres, but the Biden administration has continued to approve weapon sales to Israel. Quote, if Joe Biden's red line was a lie designed to make us quiet, we are instead going to become louder, bigger, and more militant, end quote, stated Answer Coalition National Director Brian Becker at the rally in front of the White House. Answer member Eugene Purrier called the People's Red Line, quote, an unmistakable message that none in our name will we allow a genocide to be waged. From D.C. to Palestine, we are the red line, end quote. Our lives are intrinsically connected to those in the global south. Speakers at the rally also condemned the Biden administration for sending unlimited supplies of military aid for endless wars and genocide overseas while cutting funding to public programs at home. Quote, our lives are intrinsically connected to those in the global south because we understand that we have more in common with every community in struggle than with the so-called leaders of this country, end quote, said Party for Socialism and Liberation presidential candidate Claudia de la Cruz at the rally. Quote, we understand that the reason we are suffering a housing crisis, that we cannot access health care or education, that our migrants are being attacked, is for the same reason the U.S. imperialists launch war against poor people every day, end quote, she continued. The People's Court of Justice. After encircling the White House, activists convened the People's Court of Justice. During this tribunal, human rights attorneys and legal scholars heard testimonies coming out of Gaza about the genocidal acts committed by the Israeli military and put on trial those Israeli and U.S. officials responsible. Members of the Palestinian community read harrowing testimonies which described widespread injuries, death, starvation, and disease caused by relentless Israeli bombing, shelling, as well as through the ground invasion, occupation, and total siege of the Gaza Strip. Quote, there are a lot of kids with amputations, end quote, said one doctor's testimony from Gaza. Quote, we have only primary medical supplies, paracetamol, and ibuprofen, 2 over-the-counter painkillers, and dressing, and unfortunately, we don't have access to our clinic. The Israeli army cut our access to the road, end quote. Quote, We treated a 6-year-old female child. She was badly injured with an external fixator, a tool to hold broken bones in place, and there is a big raw area in her flesh. She was crying and shouting. She was begging for painkillers, for sedation, because she's tired of the pain, and she's tired of the inability to move her arm. End quote. The doctor's testimony continued, adding that fleas and hepatitis A were spreading rampantly through shelters and clinics in Gaza. Another witness testimony described widespread starvation. Quote, "We are forced to eat animal food just to survive," said, end quote, said the testimony. Quote, "Sometimes we eat bird food, donkey food, and sometimes grass, which we pick from the corners of the streets. We're trying to survive hunger. 1 kilogram of rice costs $33, so I can afford to feed the children. We don't have any clean water. There's no drinkable water. You don't have electricity and cannot get medicine," end quote. With all the evidence laid out before them and the crowd, the People's Court of Justice found Benjamin Netanyahu, Yoav Gallant, Joe Biden, Lloyd Austin, and Antony Blinken all guilty of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. This is a photo. A testimony is read at the People's Court of Justice. Credit Vince Tsai. June 8 demonstrated the people's determination to end the U.S.-Israel genocide in Gaza and bring those responsible to justice. We will continue to demand a complete end to all U.S. support for Israel, and we will continue to fight until Palestine is free of occupation and colonization from the river to the sea. We call on the people all around the world to urgently draw the red line against genocide by organizing actions at the offices of elected officials and all institutions complicit in the genocide of Palestinian people. To register an action, go to shutitdownforpalestine.org. All right. So that's just an update, a summary, and a call to action to keep supporting this movement to support Palestine. This is clearly a genocide happening. It's occupation, it's apartheid, it's what fascists do for more land, for more supremacy, for more control of the region. So we are going to keep supporting Palestine. My specific take on it is to dissolve Israel, to defeat Zionism. Otherwise, it's going to be like a cancer and just grow again. That's just my honest take on it. I have nothing against Jewish people. I have nothing against the religion of Judaism. I respect all religions until you start using them as a weapon to oppress other people and to harm other people. If you think your religion justifies hurting other people, you need to check and get a new religion. Okay? So that is my take on this article. As someone who practices Stoicism, I have to respect all human life and treat all people as equals, whether you're Jewish or Palestinian. But the region overall, the people of the region there should control the region, not Britain, not Zionists, not Americans. So I say stop all the funding for Israel, defund Israel, dissolve Israel, and have a one-state solution to give people the regency of the region the power to vote and to return. Right. That's my take on that. There's a lot of articles. There's been like 10 articles since for the last 2 weeks. Okay, so let me get right into the next article. I'll have a little sip. Woo! This New England heat wave hasn't been intense. It's crazy to be in a area of the United States where it's like 90 degrees 1 minute, and then there's a giant storm for the next few hours, and then the next day you're back to like 90-degree weather. But that's where we are. All right. Feeling the Pain, Inflation, Wages, and the Working Class by Eugene Purrier, June 11th, 2024. 2-minute read. Photo workers pack boxes in a logistic warehouse. Credit U.S. Department of Agriculture. Once again, the mainstream is touting, quote, blowout, quote, job, end quote, job reports, according to data within the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS. Report released Friday, 272,000 jobs were created last month, which was above most expectations from the economic, quote, professionals, end quote. This has led to another wave of articles about how President Biden is presiding over a booming economy, but isn't getting any credit for it because workers are too dumb to know how they have it, how good they have it. And we've said before, quote, major economic statistics measures stability, not quality of life. This creates a disconnect between how the economy is perceived, rooted in class interests, end quote. If we start from this point, it's easy to understand the pessimism on the economy from many workers. Take, for instance, a recent, quote, jobs, end quote, and, quote, inflation, end quote, report from the BLS. According to these, in May 2024, wages on average rose 4.1%, while inflation on average rose 3.4%. Income outpacing inflation is good, right? A sign people should have at least a little more money to spend. This is true to a degree, but a deeper look shows exactly the folly of using mainstream statistics as our sole benchmark. First, these are averages, so many people's wages did not rise faster than inflation, hence why 21.3% of all U.S. workers found it, quote, very difficult, end quote, to meet their, quote, usual household expenses, end quote, week to week, and why an additional 44.8 million found it, quote, somewhat difficult, end quote. It's also useful to examine the most recent Consumer Price Index report from the BLS to get a sense of why workers are not jumping for joy at Bidenomics, quote, Bidenomics, end quote. The cost of housing is up 5.5% since May 2023, and electricity 5.1%, pinching you in areas where you don't have much choice but to absorb the pain. And if you want to escape a little bit, that's also going to hurt since the cost of, quote, food away from home, end quote, is up 4.1%. You can save a bit by going to the grocery store, but prices there are still up 2.2% from this time last year. Gas is, quote, only, end quote, up 1.2% since last May. But when gas prices are ranging from $3 to $5 a gallon, any increase is less than a welcome, especially if you want a summer vacation. Is it any wonder then that there is a lot of economic unhappiness when you rank gas, groceries, cookouts, happy hours, and air conditioning are all more expensive? The capitalist press and the Biden administration all refuses to truly acknowledge this, instead blaming workers for their own problems. This, as we've said before, is even more evidence that, quote, the economy needs radical change, end quote. Yeah. So the way I see it is if you were someone that was making $20 an hour last year and you didn't get a raise, or you got a raise, a minuscule raise that's only maybe 3% or 2% for the year, and you're making maybe $21 an hour, that isn't keeping up with inflation, and it's not keeping up with the speed that inflation rose cost of things within the last 4 years. Don't forget that a carton of eggs that maybe was $2 is now $4, and so forth. You take into consideration other prices like electricity has doubled in some areas, but your wages haven't, right? So yeah, you're taking hits in a lot of places, and yeah, maybe other people are beginning to get jobs, but that doesn't take you out of the hole that this inflation and this mass transfer of wealth to the rich has put you in. It's getting harder for people to save money, harder for people to save for retirement, harder for people to save for medical emergency, harder for people to spend to buy homes or to save up for their kids' colleges, you know. And we're talking about here that some people, I think they're saying over 60% of the U.S. population are living paycheck to paycheck or are $1,000 away from debt, from being broke, right? So this is the big issue. This just goes to the example of the ghoulishness of capitalism in the Western Empire, how during the COVID pandemic, it was used as a tool for money mismanagement to redirect more money, more wealth to the 1% and sprinkle a little more change to the rest of the working class in America. It just shows how the system is rigged. It's rigged for the 1%, for the corporations, against the working class. The working class always suffers the most when inflation happens, and companies get to report record profits. That's weird. Why? Because they're getting all the bailouts. They're doing buybacks. They're doing stock buybacks. They're paying all their investors. So don't forget, this means that people with wealth are getting wealthier, while working class people that are just working to survive, are getting crunched harder. This is not. This is how ghoulish capitalism is. It rewards those who have plenty, and impoverishes those who are already borderline poor. It rewards ghoulish actions like buybacks, like cutting wages, like Starbucks that likes to close down Starbucks stores when they try to unionize for better wages and for better living. The federal government is not protecting us, the people. It is working for the corporations. This is not a monopoly, it's oligarchy. And the oligarchy runs the government, whether they're Republican or Democrats. That's why when you see rich people running, you shouldn't think of them as all Democrats or Republicans. You should just think of them as part of the establishment, part of the oligarchy, like Biden, Trump, RFK. They're establishment pawns. They're puppets. They're going to do exactly what is necessary to keep the status quo up, uh, and sprinkle some change on the working class while taking money out of their back pockets. All right. So that is my thoughts on that. And yeah, Biden does not deserve your vote. Neither does Biden. Neither does Trump. Neither does RFK. My personal view, depending on who's available in my area on the ballot, I'll be voting likely for Claudia de la Cruz or Jill Stein. And why? Because they are the kind of people that will actually get a ground movement going for the working class to rise up. Okay, let's move along to the next article. Let me do a check here of the audio just in case. Audio check 1 2 1 2. All is good, and the video is good as good. All right. Next article. Woo! Shooting through these here. I'm gonna keep these to a limit of 1 hour every Sunday. So I'm only gonna get as long as 1 hour allows me here. So far, I'm going through like one article every 10 minutes, so maybe I can get 5 done today. All right. Next article, racist anti-immigrant SB 1070 2.0 in Arizona heads to ballot. This is by Pedro Gomez, June 11th, 2024, 3-minute read. In a troubling convergence of policy and rhetoric, both the Biden administration and the federal level and lawmakers in Arizona are again staking out a far-right reactionary stance on immigration. President Biden's recent executive orders, which tighten asylum restrictions and expedite deportations, mirror the hardline immigration policies championed by his predecessor, Donald Trump. Meanwhile, in Arizona, Republicans in the state house have pushed HCR 2060 to the ballot this upcoming November, an initiative deemed, quote, SB 1070 2.0, end quote, that would further criminalize undocumented immigrants and erode civil liberties. Together, these actions exemplify a bipartisan shift towards policies marked by increased state control, demilitarization of the border, and the skateboarding of oppressed populations. HCR 2060 would grant local law enforcement broad powers to question and detain individuals suspected of being undocumented, reminiscent of SB 1070's controversial, quote, show me your papers, end quote, provisions signed into law in 2010 by then Governor Jan Brewer. HCR 2060 would enable local authorities to enforce federal immigration laws without clear guidelines or accountability, potentially leading to abuse and overreach. Notably, HCR 2060 lacks exemptions for sensitive locations such as schools, hospitals, and places of worship, where enforcement actions would have particularly harmful effects on vulnerable populations. This measure could institutionalize racial profiling by allowing law enforcement to act as federal immigration enforcers, leading to wrongful detentions based on appearance and skin color. Furthermore, it provides immunity to officials who enforce these laws, potentially protecting those who engage in discriminatory practices from legal consequences. HCR 2060 is passed by voters. If passed by voters, could potentially make its provisions even harder to challenge down the road by bypassing the governor's veto power and going directly to the ballot box. Racist immigration policies in Arizona are a long-standing issue deeply rooted in the state's history. The Copper State has a legacy of intimidation against its large Latino population, recently exemplified by figures such as Joe Arpaio, who served as Maricopa County Sheriff from 1993 to 2017. Arpaio's tenure was marked by his harsh treatment of prisoners, criminalization of undocumented workers, and endorsement of vigilante violence. In addition, State Superintendent Tom Horn's efforts to eliminate ethnic studies and dual language education furthered this trend. SB 1070 in 2010 initially granted state and local police the authority to act as federal immigration officers, making the lack of proper documentation a misdemeanor and institutionalizing racial profiling under the guise of, quote, reasonable suspicion, end quote. The U.S. District Court issued a preliminary injunction against key provisions of Arizona's SB 1070 following a lawsuit by the Obama administration prompted by public outrage. This situation mirrored the 2006 pro-immigrant movement against the Sensenbrenner bill, where activists persisted despite opposition from liberal leaders. Immigrant rights are human rights is one of the pictures here. A protest of SB 1070, April 26, 2010, photo by Bob Davis. And I can't believe it's 2024 and we're doing this all over again. Although the Obama administration presented itself as anti-SB 1070, it simultaneously increased deportations to record levels. SB 1070 remains law in Arizona, albeit without the enjoyed provisions such as mandates for police to investigate immigration status, penalties for not carrying documentation, mandatory arrest for minor offenses, or allowance for warrantless arrest of suspected undocumented individuals. Terror against Arizona's immigrant community persists, and the push for passage of HCR 2060 is the latest chapter of this. The Democrats' prioritization on border control and military spending has led to the neglect of essential services such as housing, healthcare, and education. Their willingness to sell immigrants reveals their true nature. Progressive and revolutionary people should not be fooled by the Democrats' pro-immigrant rhetoric. Continued organizing is necessary to struggle against laws like HCR 2060 and similar measures. Rejecting both bourgeois political parties, the focus should be on building an independent pro-immigrant mass movement interconnected with the oppressed worldwide. Global solidarity movements, such as those supporting the Palestinian struggle, underscore the importance of collective liberation. True comprehensive immigration, reform, and equality for immigrants demands the end of U.S. imperialism in Latin America and the global South. This calls for dismantling all walls from Mexico to Palestine as the only way to achieve genuine liberation for all. All right, short article, but a lot saying here. First, let's take at the mentality in Arizona here. These are people that believe freedom, but want to put authoritarians into more power for, say, the police to pretty much stop and frisk people that look like they might be undocumented immigrants, which would pretty much be anyone they would want to stop and be like, this people look like they could be immigrants, right? So what is it? It's a racist law. It's straight out what it is. It's an authoritarian law, and it's a cruel law because that means you can stop anyone on their way to work and make them late for work just because you think they are undocumented. This will have very oppressive consequences to minorities, whether they're citizens or not, whether they're documented or not. So yeah, the state did it, and now they're putting it up to a vote. Hopefully, the people of Arizona have some common sense and totally deny the new 2060 bill that should be up for a vote. And in regards to the end of the article here about knocking down borders, yeah, this is humanity should be way past borders. Like, we have all the technology, we have all the critical thinkers in the world now that can scholarly thinkers that can actually like spread great ideas as to why borders should be obsolete and the world should be united as one, with even with all our differences. um, Borders are created for powerful people to stay in power. It has nothing to do with the working class, trust me. uh, they try to pit us against each other, against other nations. These wars have nothing to do with us. These economy wars have nothing to do with us, the working class. It's about the powerful just wanting to be more powerful than the next country. That's exactly what it's about. For when they send you to war to fight wars for rich people, they're not sending you to defend your freedoms. They're sending you to defend the wealth and power of the elite, of the 1%. So don't get drafted. Don't fight wars. Trust me. If another nation were to invade America tomorrow and take over America, not much would probably change for you and your family. It just wouldn't. You would still have to work. You would still have to do labor. But if America decides to uh, evolve consciousness, and become a better country for itself, for its people, for the world, this wouldn't be a problem. I don't want to get too into the depth about what communist or socialist or a sustainable economy would be like, but a lot of this has to do with it, because this is really just the propaganda turning the people against the people, turning the working class against the working class, turning uh, the United States against Mexico or other southern countries, just for the sake of maintaining power. Okay, there's plenty of resources for everybody, but eventually there won't be. But the main issue for the lack of resources is not other people from other nations taking it from you, is elitists taking it and withholding it from the working class. All righty, let's move along. So this one says it's a video of workers, mothers, socialists, how Claudia and Karina became fighters. This is interesting. Video of workers, mothers, socialists, how Claudia and Karina became fighters for a new system, PSL Roundtable. So this is the introduction to the video. I'll read this. Claudia de la Cruz and Karina Garcia, the president and vice presidential candidates for the Party for Socialism and Liberation, are both working class mothers. Their lives have been shaped by the huge hurdles this system places in front of mothers and informs their commitment to fighting for justice on all fronts. So this is an article by Liberation Staff, June 12, 2024. In this roundtable discussion, Claudia and Karina are joined by Caro Yao, a campaign volunteer and organizer with the PSL, to discuss motherhood under capitalism, the fight against patriarchy, and their prospective journeys in becoming not only organizers themselves, but socialists fighting for revolution in our lifetime. So here we have workers, mothers, socialists, how Claudia and Karina became fighters for a new system. And this video here is on YouTube. If you look at this article, there's a link to the video. I'm going to click on it right away just to tell you a little bit more about the video. Going to the video right now. I'm going to pause it right there. And this video on the PSL channel on YouTube, PSL Nation. Okay. I'm not going to watch it, obviously. We're going to move along to the next article, but I recommend people to watch it or listen to it while they drive to work or whatever. and to learn more about Claudia de la Cruz and Karina. I'm going to do another quick audio check. All right. Audio check's good. Little sip here. Dozens quitting U.S. military over Gaza in protest. All right. Writer for this article is Mike Prisner, June 13th, 2024. Well, this is a long article. We are republishing this exclusive report from the Empire Files. All right. Yeah, Mike Prisner, I believe is how you say his name. Excellent. He's done great work for the Empire Files. He is a veteran that has joined the Empire Files to report on the atrocities and the flaws of the U.S. empire. And the read goes, the day after Aaron Bushnell put on his Air Force uniform and became the first U.S. service member to earn the title of, quote, martyr, end quote, across the world, the Pentagon's press secretary was asked in the briefing room, quote, is the Secretary of Defense concerned that this airman's actions may indicate there's a deeper issue, maybe U.S. military personnel being concerned about how weapons and support for Israel is being used on civilians in Gaza? End quote. The brave General Pat Ryder cowered from the question with a stock, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, end quote, response. But maybe he didn't answer because it was too obvious. Of course, Bushnell was just the tip of the iceberg. It's a younger military move from the jingoism of the 9/11 generation, where left-wing ideas are far more popular, while facilitating the most grotesque war crimes ever witnessed every day, which they see as they scroll TikTok from the motor pool or wherever they are hiding from their platoon leaders. Months later, more of that iceberg has been revealed as it floats above the ocean of propaganda. According to Maria Santelli, executive director of the Center of Conscience and War, since October 7th, they have helped over 40 U.S. troops file for conscientious objector status who cite the U.S. role in the Gaza genocide as their turning point. These are soldiers who have taken individual rebellious actions to remove themselves from participating in any way or even wearing the uniform of Israel's biggest supporter. While CO is a right to all service members, it is a step that requires a lot of courage and resolve to take. The number of CO applicants over Gaza through the GI Rights Hotline remains steady, with soldiers who have reached their breaking point. Santelli also reports that a number of soldiers have called the hotline after going AWOL, absent without official leave, who report their anger over U.S. reports for Israel's massacre being the trigger. In parentheses, the hotline does not publicize numbers of AWOL troops who reach out for help, in parentheses. Several additional troops have quit the military publicly. On June 4th, Major Harrison Mann went public that he resigned from his position in the Defense Intelligence Agency as well as from the Army in protest for the Gaza genocide, saying, quote, I'm confident saying it's certainly some measure of ethnic cleansing, end quote, highly inconvenient for the Pentagon, given Major Mann is a decorated officer, is Jewish, is a Middle East expert, and is willing to go on mainstream news shows to say his piece. While Mann got the most coverage, he's not the only one to take public action. On March 31st, Senior Airman Larry Herbert took 40 days leave from his unit based in Spain and used it to wage a hunger strike in front of the White House, holding a sign reading, quote, active duty airman refuses to eat while Gaza starves, end quote. On June 7th, he dropped his paperwork filing for a conscientious objector discharge. When I spoke with him after filing, he told me, one key value they teach us in the Air Force is integrity first. They explain this as doing the right thing when nobody's watching. Today, I feel like many of us are doing the wrong thing while everyone is watching. Filing CO status publicly is quite rare, as most opt do it quietly to avoid reprisal. But Senior Airman Herbert is not alone in doing this. On June 5th, Senior Airman Juan Betancourt, who is the same unit as Aaron Bushnell, publicly announced via social media he too made the decision to file a conscientious objector over the genocide while backing an appeal for redress, parentheses, which allows active duty troops to petition Congress with their grievances, end parentheses. His turning point was at Bushnell's official memorial service of Lackland Air Force Base. He left a small Palestinian flag on the visual table, the only reference at the entire ceremony of Bushnell's cause. He told me, I was moved by Aaron's final message and his determination to shake us out of our comfortable lives and draw our eyes towards the atrocities happening in Gaza. I believe it is unconscionable to expect military personnel to comply with genocide and blatant disregard for domestic, humanitarian, and international laws. It is highly significant for a U.S.-backed operation to draw such resistance from within the ranks. The dramatic action of Bushnell, the high-profile resignation of Major Mann, two simultaneous public conscientious objectors campaigns with scores of others following suit in secret. Many others have decided to end their military careers and join the pro-Palestine movement while they ride out the remainder of their contracts or find ways to get discharged medically. I spoke with 5 of them on condition of anonymity, fearing repercussion from their command amidst a formal request from Senate Armed Services Committees for the Department of Defense to rout out left-wing, quote, extremism, end quote, in the wake of Aaron Bushnell. Quote, feeling trapped, it became very clear that I could no longer do this job, end quote. Technical Sergeant R., who has spent 16 years in the Air Force working as a loadmaster for cargo planes, told me, after October 7th, I found out the C-17 unit I was transferring to was involved in doing cargo runs to Israel. Feeling trapped, it became very clear that I could no longer do this job. This tech sergeant was able to get removed from his normal duties and is currently pursuing a discharge despite being just 3 years from retirement, telling me, it was very hard to make a decision with retirement being so close, but as I continued to track the situation in Gaza, there was absolutely no way I could carry on. Specialist O, who says they are one of 6 pro-Palestine soldiers in their unit, is an Army engineer who has attended over a dozen pro-Palestine protests and traveled hours by bus to join the, quote, red line, end quote, around the White House on Saturday. They told me, before October 7th, I didn't think much about my position in the military. I was there solely to get an education. Being there was like working any other job. But after October 7th, the prospect of being deployed increased significantly, and it forced me to face the reality of what it meant to be a soldier in the Army, a pawn for U.S. imperialism. When I asked what they would do if they did receive those deployment orders, Specialist O replied, I would chain myself to a street lamp if they tried to send me anywhere. Corporal D, an Army tank crewman, has attended more than 15 protests against the genocide and also taken on organizing roles in building the action. He told me, these months had led me to believe that there are many in the military who feel the same way but are hesitant to speak out. He went on to report that he knows at least 5 soldiers in his unit who support Palestine. Corporal D, who planned to become an officer and make a career out of the Army, now plans to be discharged this summer. Quote, it is an embarrassment to put this uniform on every day, end quote. Lieutenant K, a Navy surface warfare officer, told me, through my training to become an officer, I have been taught about the Navy's core values and ethics. The actions my government has taken now regarding Israel and Palestine goes against every single one. Our government is complicit in genocide, and it is an embarrassment to put this uniform on every day. Lieutenant K also initially planned to serve 20 years, but has now decided not to re-enlist. Quote, instead of taking care of the people or its veterans, they send money for genocide, and it's disgusting, end quote. He says he has several colleagues who agree with him. Another naval officer, Lieutenant T, told me, after October 7th, seeing absolutely abhorrent response from Israel and the U.S., I felt compelled to do something within my control, even if it was as small as petitioning for a designation as a conscientious objector. I could no longer hide from the reality that my employment by the Navy allowed me to benefit from the genocide of Palestinians and decide I would not participate in quelling their right to emancipation. All this can only be just another surface layer, which gets wider and deeper the deeper you go. The sector of service members who have turned against the US Israeli policy in a profound way is undoubtedly much bigger than we can see at the moment. The Pentagon is no doubt aware of as well. The more you those troops the more those troops are inspired to stand up, the greater the pressure on Washington to end the horror, and the protest movement can add fuel to that righteous fire. Throughout history, it has been unrest within the ranks, linked with the anti-war struggle in the broader population that has been decisive in bringing wars to an end. It can again today. If you are a member of the U.S. military and want to know more about your legal rights to get out or to protest, call the GI Rights Hotline for 24/7 private expert counseling at 1-877-447-4487. You can also get more information from to A Guide to Getting Out of the U.S. Military Now on the Eyes Left podcast. If you'd like to speak out or need support, contact Mike at theempirefiles@gmail.com. Disclaimer: the comments made by Larry Herbert, Juan Betancourt, and the 5 other service members are their views alone and do not reflect the Department of Defense, Air Force, Army, or Navy. All right, solid article on how even military people are starting to realize they should not be bootlickers from the empire. They should not sacrifice their lives to kill poor people in another country just to make the wealthier wealthier here in the empire, in the Western Empire. These are not wars for freedom. These are not wars for justice. These are wars for profit, and they are ghoulish wars. You have no obligation, I don't care if you're in the military or not, to be a patriot and defend the wealth of the elite. That's all patriotism means, that you are pledging allegiance to the elite, to the wealthy, while they allow people, over 600,000 people in the United States, sleep in the streets tonight, when there's over 15 million vacant homes, when they allow over 60,000 people a year to die due to lack of health care, when they have plenty of medicine to give to people in need and to treat people. When you have one of the richest, most advanced civilizations and countries in the world that still has lower literacy rates than other developed countries, that has more pregnancy mortality rates than other developed countries, that has lower education standards than other countries, and that rather produce billions of dollars worth of gear for war than to invest on workers for infrastructure within its own nation. If you do not owe your allegiance to that, your allegiance to be to humanity, to being a humanitarian, to being a good neighbor to not just your neighbor next to you and not just your relatives, but to people all around the world, and to treat each other as equals and respect each other as equals. This is my view as a leftist, as well as someone that practices Stoicism, that is learning more about Stoicism, that's learning more of leftist views, that we should be united as a working class, as a proletariat, to rehabilitate and help everybody, not work for the main profit of the elite that say they're our leaders because they are the best at what they do, and the best what they do is give us trickle-down economics. Okay, so we're going to move along to the next article here. Ooh, there's a lot of articles today. think I could read one more. Take a little sip. All right, I'm going to finish with this one for today and give my final thoughts. Stop the Mountain Valley Pipeline by Ryan Kidweiler, June 14th, 2024. 3-minute read. All right. The photo is of the MVP near Virginia's Brush Mountain. Credit Mountain Valley Watch. Stop the Mountain Valley Pipeline. All right. On Monday, June 10th, Mountain Valley Pipeline LLC submitted a letter to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission requesting approval to begin service of the Mountain Valley Pipeline on the basis that it is now, quote, mechanically complete, end quote. Within 24 hours, the commission granted approval for the developers to begin operations, allowing for the flow of fracked natural gas to the heart of Appalachia. This approval comes after a decade of outrage from frontline communities and environmental activists who had, up until now, successfully delayed construction of the pipeline, largely through legal action and community resistance. MVP, a climate catastrophe in the making. After first proposed in 2014 with an in-service target date of 2018, the MVP intends to carry fracked natural gas from Wetzel County, West Virginia, to Pennsylvania County, Virginia. The pipeline stretches 303 miles across steep and unstable mountainous terrain, crossing nearly 1,000 streams and freshwater ecosystems, disrupting indigenous burial grounds and putting hundreds of poor and working-class communities at risk. Furthermore, the FERC has allowed pipeline developers throughout the process of the eminent domain to seize people's land under the guise of, quote, public interest, end quote. One of the immediate concerns of the frontline communities is the risk of pipeline explosions and water contamination. The Appalachian Mountain Range is known for its steep, unstable slopes, leading to increased risk of landslides. In fact, landslides have resulted in at least 5 gas pipeline explosions in Appalachia alone since 2018. This is particularly concerning given the size and production capacity of the MVP. At 42 inches in diameter and 2.0 billion cubic feet of natural gas per day, the MVP places communities, homes, schools, and churches directly in the blast zone. While pipeline developers claim that all necessary safety and regulatory requirements have been met, opponents disagree, pointing to a failed hydro test that occurred just last month when pressurized water caused a segment of the pipe to rupture. See image below. This is just one of the 130 so-called, quote, anomalies, end quote, requiring repair and analysis as reported by pipeline developers this month to the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. And there's a picture here of a burst pipeline. Seems like something we don't need. Photo, the ruptured pipeline after a failed hydro test. Credit, Grace Terry. The threats posed by the MVP are far greater than those facing the local communities of West Virginia and Virginia. In a 2017 report, Oil Change International found that the climate impact of the MVP is to be equivalent to about 26 coal-fired power plants or more than 19 million passenger vehicles. Greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels projects like the MVP are direct contributors to climate change, leading to disastrous weather patterns and heat waves such as those which have killed dozens across India in recent weeks. Biden abandons climate promises. Despite increasing rhetoric from the White House that attempts to paint President Joe Biden as a, quote, climate president, end quote, the final approval to begin operation of the MVP would not have been possible without the help of Biden and Senator Joe Manchin. In June 2023, negotiations between Senator Manchin and the White House resulted in the Fiscal Responsibility Act, a debt ceiling bill that included provisions for permitting reform. The bill, which describes the MVP as a matter of, quote, national interest, end quote, ultimately fast-tracked the completion of the pipeline by requiring the Secretary of the Army to issue all necessary permits within 21 days and denied judicial review of such permits by any court. The egregious side deal forced through by Senator Manchin and signed into law by President Biden, was undoubtedly a direct response to the growing pressure from frontline communities and pipeline fighters who delayed the pipeline for a decade and doubled its construction costs from its initial $3.5 billion price tag. The fight continues. In a statement following the announcement of FERC's approval, Russell Chisholm, co-director of the Protect Our Water Heritage Rights Coalition, issues a warning. Quote, "Let this travesty be a lesson to all financiers, government officials, and regulators. Stop backing all fossil fuel projects immediately," end quote. Chisholm asserted that the fight is not over. Quote, "We have 303 miles of failing pipes, with at least 130 identified anomalies, pumping methane gas through our communities, and we are being targeted by new projects like Southgate and the Southeast Supply Enhancement Project. We deserve better, and we are never going to stop demanding better," end quote. The ultimate approval of the MVP displays the inability and unwillingness of our so-called representatives, Democrats and Republicans alike, to bring about any meaningful climate solutions. The profit-driven system of capitalism places the interests of the fossil fuels executive and shareholders over the health, safety, and well-being of the people and the planet. Climate solutions exist, but we must look beyond capitalism and towards a socialist reconstruction of society, one in which energy production is decommodified, decarbonized, and decolonialized. That is on point, exactly what I agree. As we were talking about these subjects earlier, capitalism, again, as I reiterate, is just a system that rewards the most ghoulish. It commodifies something and tries to make a profit system out of it. And now you have big oil, which is like big meat or big pharma or big military, that they are so big that they are now too big to fail because they have so much money invested in these corporations that they have to buy politicians to create policies that keep them afloat to continue profiting, even though it's against the better interests of humanity overall. We already know that these pipelines, that oil power, that even though it is the main source that makes pretty much every machine run in the world, to be honest, it is hazardous. Oil is hazardous for communities, especially pipelines. They pollute the oceans, they pollute the air. And at what point do we decide that we need to stop burning oil and coal and other natural minerals? When there's no more trees left, when there's a giant carbon cloud or smog cloud surrounding the whole planet, which is eventually what's going to happen if we keep burning everything and just we keep increasing population, because everything's based on supply and demand, which is based on exponential growth, right? There has to be a point where we as humanity have to be rational and reasonable and understand that we do not live in a planet with infinite resources. So we cannot keep growing indefinitely, and we cannot keep wishfully thinking that we're going to move to Mars or something ridiculous like that. This space age travels is ridiculous. The best thing we could do for space is explore it through photographs and put satellites up for better information, hopefully, and not for war systems. But yeah, eventually, what we really need to do is stop population growth. We can't just keep multiplying like rabbits because we're not tiny like rabbits. And we have to rationalize that we can't just keep building indefinite cars forever. We need to start recycling and reusing what we have already. We just can't keep digging and burning for oil. And this new green energy system is just a capitalist new form of system. You still have to use minerals, pull minerals from the ground to keep creating new green cars. So you're just running into a new problem. These are realities that people need to face because we might not suffer the consequences, even though we're suffering the consequences now with all these weird weather patterns. But children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren will definitely feel it. And as someone who is a leftist, a socialist, a Marxist, a communist, and practicing Stoic, I believe that the virtuous thing to do is to leave the world better for those ahead of that are coming after us, and to make the world better now for those in need that are in worse situations than we are. And that's why we should help everybody, and an unequivocal everybody, regardless of who they are, what they are, what their lifestyle is. Um, we should respect and treat everyone as equals and help them out and help lift them up, rehabilitate everyone as much as we can, not put them in cages, not bomb them, not think that we're superior to them. We're not superior to anybody. We all die. We all end up back in the ground. So we need to respect each other and keep fighting to make this world a better place for everybody, regardless of what nationality or where they're from or where they're coming from. Because we're all just going to end up at the same place anyways. So we must live that kind of virtuous life, following what I've learned of the four pillars of Stoicism, which are virtue, knowledge, justice, and temperance. Um, yeah. So let's stay united as a working class and continue helping each other out, because, well, as they say, a rising tide lifts all boats. Okay. All right. Everyone have a great weekend, and we'll keep catching up with these, and I'll catch up with you next weekend. Goodbye.